I'm gonna show you exactly how I program out to build muscle mass in my athletes during the off season. Let's get into it. Yo, what's going on guys? Chris One here, Overtime Athletes. And for today's video, it's kind of a follow-up to a video in reference to how we actually develop mass or build muscle for our athletes during an off season. I'll link that first video right here down below. And really what that goes over is how we utilize both German volume training and the Wendler 5-3-1 method to play off each other. This addresses all the volume, all of the exercise selection, and how we increase the hormonal response through those compound lifts to overall gain mass. And what I wanted to do was make a follow-up video to that in regards to actually how we're programming the auxiliaries, okay? So these are gonna be the supplemental strength exercise. When do I program them in the off season? How do I balance those out so that we're still increasing an athlete's performance, but being able to stimulate that hypertrophy to overall grow their muscles? Now, in the beginning of off season, as I suggested before, I usually like a upper-lower split where we do 2 days upper body, 2 days lower body. Now, within those upper and lower body days, I wanna continue to balance out those primal patterns, your push, your pull, your twist, your squat, your lunge, your bend. So really what I'm trying to do over those course of those 4 days during a week is to balance those days out. So let's get right into it. Starts off with your upper body. First, what we want to be able to do is we want to balance out our pushing and pulling. So we usually do, depending on the athlete, 2 days of some kind of horizontal pressing, whether it be with a barbell or dumbbells and other variations of. So what I really need to focus on when I'm addressing hypertrophy is their pulling. And I like to balance out 1 day where we do a primary horizontal pull and 1 day where we do a primary vertical pull. Now, as a secondary push to the horizontal, we'll usually perform some kind of vertical variation, again, depending on the athlete. If they're an athlete that I don't want to load up directly overhead, we could perform some kind of landmine or some kind of incline pressing where we're pressing more at that 45-degree angle than overhead. But in any event, we're usually balancing out and supersetting one of those primary pulls with a secondary push, right? So that balances out our push-pull. And like I said, in the beginning of the off season, I can add a little bit more single joint isolated movements where I get more integrated total body movements as we progress through the off season. However, when we are in the beginning of that off season, I usually then want to attack some kind of supplemental exercise for the shoulder. And what I really like to do with the shoulder is I really like to focus on the lateral or the posterior heads and don't do too much on the anterior, right, or your front deltoid, because you usually get enough of that stimulus from the amount of pushing that we do, whether that be horizontal or vertical. Now, after we've addressed the shoulder, then I usually go into some kind of superset where I can go into that single joint isolated, where I do an arm flexion, a bicep. Usually between the 2 days, I'll hit bicep on both days. On one, I'm gonna do some kind of hammer variation. And on the second, I'm gonna do very basic vanilla. Just make sure that we prescribe enough volume. As we progress through the off season, I like to get things like a rope or a fat grip involved so we can also get that grip involved. And then after that, I usually do 2 days where I'm supersetting again with their arms, triceps. So on day one, I might do some kind of cable extension, some kind of press variation, or some kind of elbow extension where they're doing something like a skull crusher. But I like to balance those two out and just make sure that we're attacking it from all angles. Now, we're not trying to be a bodybuilder here. It's not like I'm adding anything too funky or fancy. If I really need that athlete to gain some weight, I might just go up to 20 rep sets. Now, when it comes to the lower body, what we want to do, be able to do to balance out is after our compound lift, whether it be squat or deadlift, we always focus on a unilateral movement, okay? So we still need to address the needs of the actual athlete in competition while being able to program through volume and through the overall stimulus. So it could be a reverse lunge, it could be a walking lunge, a forward lunge. We obviously balance out the frontal plane, but something that's really going to attack, not only obviously from the hypertrophy perspective, but also we can start to eliminate those strength imbalances the more we address those single leg work. Following that, I usually like to do some kind of posterior chain movement. Now, I usually, if I'm gonna isolate the posterior chain, I like to break it down into two factors. One, we're gonna address the glutes, right? Working across the hips. And two, we'll address the hamstrings. And usually I rotate that between one day and the second day. And then finally, I like to balance out the lower limb. I wanna do something for the anterior tibialis, basically the front of the shin, and then also for your calf muscles, whether that be from a standing perspective or more from a seated perspective, working the soleus. So I really just wanna go down the line and make sure I'm balancing out, touching all those things out from a well-balanced program and making sure that we're getting that stimulus through enough volume, okay? But really the biggest thing was to be able to show you how that's balanced out through the course of 4 days of training. And then as we continue to move through the off season, we can then get a little bit more specific, get a little bit more complex in our movements, start to integrate upper and lower halves. Like I said, they've already developed a prerequisite for their strength, and that's where we start to kind of tip the scale to a little bit more of the dynamic effort work that we've been performing. Our speed, our plyos, our speed strength, our moving our weight a little bit faster. So I hope that helps. Hey, if you guys are interested in a full program that lays all of this out, I've released Athletic Mass, which is the program that addresses both that compound German volume training, the Wendler 531, paired with these auxiliaries and supplemental strength. It's a complete blueprint for athletes to be able to follow from A to Z. If you're interested in that, check it out down below, and I'll holler at you guys next time.